Hi, I'm Seamless, and today I'm going to show you how to make this sound. Whee! So, long story short, this is how to synth 37B because this is essentially a continuation of what was this guy from the last guy. It's a simplification, a reduction, and then it's cloned 8 times, and then it's sent into a room and compressed. And that's what this is. And the individual dudes were all randomized in specific ways to make them feel like a group of a thing happening in the way that's conducive to sounding like an actual string section does when a bunch of dudes or ladies are in a room with violins playing a thing. That is basically the point of this whole deal. Now, this has, I guess, unfortunately, I call it unfortunately. I'm actually quite surprised I got this far with this because here comes now the log story. So this all started because I made a real kind of good gains on making the first of this. Like this is called four strings and there's clones. This one's called good string and then there's clones. And then the other one there was just 4 of these. And the whole reason I had 4 of them was just in the eventuality that a person playing like a solo instrument wanted to play that many notes because there's that many strings on one of those instruments. But in reality, I only needed there ever to be different harmers ever, just so that it was easy for me to do the thing where you do switch different strings, and then also that I could do the legato thing by having each string be a string, like that in that regard, so that they can only play one note at a time on them. And if I wanted to play a chord, or if I wanted to switch up, it has particular ways to articulate, and this is one easy way to do that. And then in the MIDI, you utilize it like this. This is color 1 and 4 to indicate channels 1 and 4, and that's being used to switch between them for moments like these where you could play that on one string if you felt like it, but most of the time, position-wise, kind of like you would in a guitar, or like a moment like this where this is more about a bow switch direction change than it is anything to do with an actual string change. It's kind of a general purpose, semi-articulable nonsense, but having 4 of them is a bit of a luxury that wasn't really great when I wanted to have 8 of them, because you might have noticed the CPU was a bit extra. And this is with me reducing, not just on how many voices there are, but how much of what each voice is doing. And I really went down to the wire there. Actually, why did I check to make sure that was running on 16-bit? And also I'm using less stuff in general, with the goal to be that kind of efficient so that I could do this. But on top of that, it was also about what happened when I did do that. So anyway, moral of the story is I'm making a song, I got pretty good headway, and I'm trying to make a lead string. I'm trying to make essentially the synthesized string that I made in the previous How to Synth to be just the lead string instrument. But the problem with that is that what I wanted was a pretty generic sort of Hollywood string sound, that like just a string section on a note kind of sense, which is not what just one of these sounds like. So here's what I mean by that. Let's meet one. Cool. And then let's meet all but one dude. That one sounds less weird, but they're all about the same kind of weird. But that's sort of the point, is that it's a very individual, specific, and close kind of a sound that is not the same sound as what happens when and if you're not 100% familiar with this as just an experience playing the instrument or seeing the instrument or working with the instrument or doing all this crap that I'm doing, then it's not obvious that when you hear just a regular normal string sound in an orchestra on like a game or a movie or whatever, that you're hearing more than one instrument, that you're actually hearing a crap ton of instruments. And that's like old world sound design layering. That was the purpose of that, because any individual stringed instrument is going to have specific peculiarities about them that make them kind of weird if they were the only thing happening, which are fine, for close chamber nonsense. But if you want to have that nice spread up sound, that happens as in the case of unison. So I also have two of these dudes going, mostly so that I could have just different notes on playing together, that kind of thing. But the full effect of this desire is realized when all of them are all playing the same notes together, because then you get the full actual unison spread. In this case, I just wanted this business also was accomplished to make it feel like legit, in the sense that because both of these are going together in the same room, this is actually how this would actually sound. Because in an actual orchestra section, when you play a chord like this, it's different violins are playing the different notes most of the time. Sometimes it's close enough or whatever, or easy enough that a violinist can play the chord and everyone else is too. But if you ever play like a real close chord, which none of these are, like, but if you did, then that's one of those things that's not necessarily possible unless you have more than one instrument. So that's why that's handy. But it also sounds different if you take a recording of a full section playing one note and then a recording of the full section playing another whole note and then make that the chord. That doesn't quite sound the same as the section playing the thing. Yeah. So let's talk about the stuff I had to randomize and make this work, because this isn't even a little bit what the original guide looks like, and let's actually look at the original guide so I can show you what was wrong when I needed to apply it to this. Where did I put my presets? It's not even in here. That was the entire samples folder. And there's stuff there coming, that's for sure, insofar as an explanation today. Here we go. My other attempts. Not even the right one. 4 strings, come on. So this is the original good sounding one guy through a body in a room, good. And just by himself, it sounds okay, but then if its job is to be that cinematic presence, it can't accomplish by itself, so I need more than one of these things. So here's some issues. Actually, just that these are here is the first problem. I've actually never been able to personally pinpoint this as an issue and something I could hear until I did this. So if you're familiar with people talking about phase distortion as something to avoid in EQing, where they say you don't want to boost and you don't want to cut too hard, and you want to do very careful things to avoid certain realities. This issue is that I experienced is exactly that problem. And wow, all the people who do the mixing for like the actual orchestras and stuff are like, they have to be this careful. They actually have to. And here's why. Because these are all their special kind of random. They're all their special specific areas. And then there's a lot of randomness that does a really good job of making it so that they're basically never the same experience, regardless of how frequently in their like just the same times all of the time. That was a sentence. Then it goes through this, which is, for the most part, linear phase. So it's not going to do, even though I make some changes, it's not really going to do the damage I'm about to describe. But because this isn't linear phase, if I make a bunch of copies of this, if I make a bunch of copies where these are random, this degeneration is different, it comes through and it makes this sound different. But because this change is identical, you can hear it. You can hear it as being the similarity between them all. And you'll hear a ring. You'll start to hear it actually do, you'll hear as though you've ran the thing through a phase distortion module, and you're starting to hear that. That's what'll happen. Because all of these things that are all different, except for the things that aren't different, you'll hear the things that aren't different accentuated stupidly. And this is one of them. That was the first immediate issue, was the fact that these EQs were here at all. So that meant that I couldn't be doing this. I couldn't be doing this like piecemeal half and half nonsense with the EQs doing strange things and then attempting to make it survive by carving specific truths out of it after the fact. I'd have to have a convolution sample I can use that would do the job by itself and then end it. And I have. And that was what this section is. So I made these. And what this is a woodish sounding kind of Harmer experience. And like a dumbass, I deleted the thing that made it because it was a different project. But I will demonstrate a little bit how to do this. So first you go to oct mode, which turns it off from being harmonic. And it creates this kind of situation going forward. And we're going to screw with that with the prism. But uniquely, we're going to kill the shape and just do that. Now, I'm going to turn this way down. Which direction am I trying to go? Oh yeah, this one. There you go. Woof. So if you go on multiply mode and you go all the way on the one side with this all the way up, what that does is it flattens all the harmonics into the... I tried so hard. gosh, I guess I could just put that on. Damn. But the way we're gonna screw with this is we're gonna put a filter before the prism, and we're gonna turn on that little volume dependent mode. Use a bandpass. I'm keep forgetting which one I want in this context, but you experiment with the idea that you come on the slappy. You come on the slappy. That was the sense also. Holding it there is a bit odd, but there you go. You randomize it, and then that like extreme laser situation isn't as prevalent, which is occurring because the phases were all perfect. So screwing with this is how I got what sounded like a kind of woodish situation. Do that, do a little mapping up the filter. Do not pan. Never really needed to pan because the stereo situation of how we're going to do with the string is going to be accomplished by the room after the fact and not by the body of the string itself. Oh yeah, and then I would also automate this. I would, come on, but it'd be this. You saw how it kind of got inverted, so that's what I'll do here. So you mess around with this until you get kind of enough of a like situation you like, and eventually it was that. And then the reason why there's a crap ton of them is because of another problem about copying it, which is that this being the exact same cut in the exact same sort of shape, again, made it that it didn't matter how random this was, if it came through that way, and you could hear the way. You'll hear the way of it. It's like particles, like a particle system being forced through a channel to show a shape, right? Like you see someone's face show up in a music video in the particle field. That's with that you can see the shape of the face because it's all adhering to that as a modifier. So if this always has the same modifier, you'll see it in there like that. And that's what's also what this was, but this was a much bigger problem. And this was just merely a minor problem. And the issue is here that like I want to be different, but I don't want to be that different. So that means that I need to basically make the thing and then just randomize it and then make like 6 or 7, in this case 8, random of the similar kind, so that it's this sort of position and shape and it's doing a job, but just a little bit different, so that it is not the same. So the shape isn't exactly perfectly visible, no matter how hard you do your cloud. And that is what that came up with here. So every one of these has the one of here. And this example works best in the kind of middle range, like the viola and higher range. The exactly lowest celloish and contrabass range don't sound the best, and that's because I'm not using the low ones. These are the low ones. These are the high ones. These will sound like if I wanted to do really high violins, I would put those in there. These worked out just kind of okay as an all-purpose sort of middle up thing. But yeah, given how the CPU problem was for this one, because my plan was to make a whole like multi-instrumental section with all of these per each instrument. Because I went and looked up what orchestras looked like, you see. And now I'm that's going to be a bit of that's a deal. So that was the primary generation random, like just to get through here. But these are basically fine the way they were here, but now I needed two other issues. One issue was they needed to be bowed, but the bowing can't be identical. I have 2 different bowings here because there's 2 different groups of four instruments, but there's still 4 instruments, and the real way to do this would be to have a bowing automation for each one individually. That is still the way to, like, the perfect way to do it. It's just a lot of work. So the way that I simplified it was I have XYZ controllers where I have, here's all the individual bow controls. They did originally just go through direct to the control through to the thing, but then what I've done is I put this in the way, and then I have random channels coming out changing the smoothing speeds for all of them. And then there's a 4th one up here. That means that when you see a shape happen here, what's actually happening is that like all 8 of them are kind of blurred around the sort of position because it's moving, but it's being delayed a little bit. So like when it gets thrown around, it gets which is a bit like what you want in a section where like, yeah, you do ultimately want them all to be doing mostly the same thing, but it sounds robotically weird if it's exactly the same, really strangely perfect. And that's something that you can avoid by doing just like that. Well, you can also avoid by doing it all directly and like individually, like I said, but this saves some time. The other thing that this guy's doing is it's being hooked up to this high pass. That crunchy crunch sounds pretty sweet, but it gets real ridiculous on the high values. Like even that's pretty ridiculous, but that could be adjusted, and it's also just a different range for all the different ranges. So this kind of general purpose one just means that the lowest, gnarliest gnarls gets obliterated before it gets put in the room. It's good. And doing it over just once per thing on the deal is less bad than having it be all exactly the same on all the deals. What else? Oh yeah, so these are only here because what I'm doing with this is I'm randomizing the actual like pitch, but like minor, tiny, ridiculous amounts. Essentially doing again the real, literal purpose of the unison job of them being different pitches. Originally, I was going to try to do that by randomizing it in here, but here's the problem: is that I'm doing per voice unison or per unison voice random, which means that all unison voices would be a different pitch. It's not really what I want. Because really what I want, it needs to be like a unified situation, just that situation is a different situation per thing. And that's this. That turned out to be quite easy. Don't think anything else was super important here. Nope. So, yeah. There being 2 of these is, yep, I put these here, but I forgot by accident. There being 2 of them is mostly, again, that quality of like, I want to play chords. That's what you do when you want to play chords. It does still, yeah. Anyway, I'm just thinking about how hard it's going to be to get like the basses and all the other sort of situations at once. It's because how much CPU this is using just for this, and I feel like I reduced it enough, but I guess not. But it does work. It does. This actually is going to do the job of being the sound that's in that song, because it sounds like a string, and that's great. Yeah. My gut is telling me I'm forgetting something like integral to doing this that needs to be stated, but I don't think I am. So just to be safe, let's run through the whole process. Oh yeah, okay, good. Yep, clicking on this reminded me what. Okay, so on top of the randoming out there were some not random choices I had to make them also the appreciable kind of different from each other that works to make them not sound so synthetic. One of them was that essentially these 2 settings had to be a different one for every single harmer. And not just that they randomized and then were random differently, because they are randoming, but they need to be random within the range. Because this is the sort of thing that determines what a string's tone is. It's going to make it, like, honestly, I have probably fussed with it a little bit too far in my desire to make them be different. But their job essentially is to describe, like, the primary characteristics of the string. So if they're all the same, that's another thing that could be detected as somewhat samey. So that meant every one of them has primary different settings, or maybe it was just the other 2. Well, I guess they are on the same instruments, so they can have the same. Yeah, it's very slight. It's because there's 8 of them. Because that's the thing is that they have to be different across both of these. They can't be the same on any of the 8 that are playing together. They're playing different notes or whatever, but I tested this together on the one note. And that's why that one had to be different. So that those are all different. Oh yeah, and I think I changed the starting phase, and if I didn't, I probably should. Nope, I did. Yep. So starting phase in Harmor is a bit of a tricky thought. It has a literal like value in the sense that it has phase, and the thing that has a phase, you can change the starting position or whatever. But so many things are altering phase and in such a random way that I'm amazed it could be detected as a difference, but it can. when before it was one of those things where I wasn't even really aware that I was detecting it as a similarity until I got rid of it, and I was like, wow, there's actually room for adjustment. Oh yeah, and the last thing that changed, I'm looking right at it, the volume mapping, that had to be different. So it's random, but I also made the random of it different, mostly just because. But the reason why this has to be different was mostly for the same thing about just the truth of human playing. Even if you like, even the 7 best players in the room aren't going to be actually that perfect. So I have to make everything about this the same, like imperfect for whatever parameter a human can be in control of. And how actually accurate your level is one of them. And that means it's not as completely controlled by the bowing situation completely. So that means because it changes the move speed or whatever, but it's going to go where it's gone. It's going to go to the same locations more or less. If it goes too fast, it just won't. But where's my yeah. But this will mean that they get different at different levels of each other. Will just be represented differently each time, and that makes it better random there. And then last thing I changed, which maybe not mattered, is this thing. And the other one I mentioned that this was one of these, like, when you play the thing, your intonation isn't exactly perfect unless you're just a flawless robot. And it's not even just about like, oh, you play the note, you're hitting the fret of the note, you stay on the fret. Is that when you bow or you do anything to the string? It's not even just a bowing thing. You do any kind of articulation that makes a string happen. It changes the pitch of the string because the tension is changing. You've put tension on it. And intonation and skill of using it is that you're able to adjust for that in real time, so that you can lay on the bow, roll your hand, and stay the same note. But that's also, again, stupidly hard. And what this curve here is showing is that, like, when the bow's up and on the higher values, it's pretty well the perfect note. But right at the beginning, right where it's noisiest, it's like a little bit off and then whoop, up going on. And this, how it's off, how off, I just kind of ran around and did this to all the hardware. So I just kind of made them all various differently. Not so much allowing difference up here, but just kind of letting it breathe a little, so that exactly that particular kind of imperfection isn't something that's just the same. And that was really the job. Making anything like that, any kind of identifiable articulation that can be identifiable. If you were to do the same thing over again, would it show up the same every time? And if it does, that's something that either needs to be random or differently set for every individual. Because it's just like you did just make 7 violins, probably as close to the same as they could be made. Violins don't all own the same violin, obviously, but like that's the point, is that they're all different. They all have different characteristics. Even if the goal was sort of to produce basically the same sound, they're not actually the same. And that's really what this whole video is about. Getting down to how far that truth actually is to make a thing work correct for that. Which is cool. I didn't really know exactly how far down that was because I had not yet tried to do this. I like my analogy of the developers who were talking about doing the destruction engine and Red Faction and Guerrilla and discussing how they didn't know how to build a house. So making a destruction engine that worked all of a sudden meant that they're just like 3D plank geometry that made buildings were not effective buildings. They would just crush themselves. And that it was true for this. I made a really good individual stringed instrument, and then I did a pretty good with the string, the body, and the room simulation. And now that meant that if I wanted to have the section happen, I had to actually do it the way it's done. And that, oh yeah, and that's what these are. Finally, the last thing. I have this little knob. This is the left-right dephasing, which is a fun technique because we have the delay and we have dephasing. And what the dephasing is doing is just what it sounds like. Left and right are phased slightly different from each other, which is not quite the same as panning. And by not quite the same, I mean not even a little bit similar. It's not. It doesn't do that. It's the effect you do when you want something to appear to be closer or farther from you in certain regards. And that's what I had done on the ends of the strings before they went out to go to the room to make them feel like they're not in the same literal physical point in space, which is another thing that makes it sound kind of weird when they're all together. It's a thing that you would not have thought that you could detect as an element, that you would think, oh, that sounds like there's 8 guys in the same location, huh? But this, by like changing the phase of it, it's essentially saying that like a part of it's hitting your ear earlier or later than it did a second ago, and it's because it moved. That's what that's indication. So the settings is lightly adjusted. Most of the time, strings, like instrument sections, tend to just kind of, they have their sides of the stage or whatever. I don't actually know where this particular because I can go pretty high in the range and low, but like there is a sort of there's a bend and a stack to it, like I am doing leaning, but the convolver convolves it well enough. Just to show you, this is what it sounds like without it. This is what it sounds like without compression. Like an unrecorded string recording that's like stupidly on. And then here's what that sounds like without that. And that's what these guys are. And this is where most of them stacked up from before. Because I remember last time I had showed you what these sound like. Because this is what... Yeah, and also fun, that little tremolo bit happening in the beginning. I deliberately am using a pattern that's different on top and bottom here, just to see, because the tremolo action is mostly that you're not doing it as fast as you can, because for you to you can do a timed rhythmic version of it, like rigidly locked, or you could be a kind of freewheelie with it. And isn't that just nuts how real that works? And this is just a pulse waveform, or a wave pulse. It's a waveform. Ha. So you can make it. It gets a little out of hand, but the regular values. And here's me doing it manually, just demonstrating different articulatable possibilities by showing that there. And finally, the reason why this isn't all inside one patcher is basically entirely because I wanted to actually be able to play different notes in the same section. That's it. In order to have, because if there are ways for me to use MIDI to come out here and trigger from out here into patcher independent note controls, but I wouldn't be able to do slide notes. Not that I necessarily entirely think I should necessarily need to. I just don't like regular pitch automation is all. Because, yeah, doing stringy stuff is awesome when you... I just, like, it just works. So, yeah, I'm not giving that up. And that's, that means I need to keep them separate and then do the room calculations actually out here on the deal. This was just one of these. It wasn't even... Like, you think of these as your mic positions. And you'll be fine. It's very straightforward there. Because once you have the material and it's designed for the space that's in there and it sounds like it's supposed to, it works the way it's supposed to. Isn't that funny? If you have any questions about this, please let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. And as usual, have a nice day. Also, I hope your Christmas was merry. Later.